For the first time, Australian national Joseph Sarlak breaks his silence on the Gulf Injustice podcast about his Qatar ordeal on abandonment by the Australian government.
The Australian government is slammed for buckling to Qatar royals who consider us infidels, says Andrew Gordon, a friend of Joseph Sarlak, Australian citizen who's been detained in Qatar. Joe Sarlak, he's detained in the desert state of Qatar after being invited to develop an airport hangar for the government. Now, this would turn out to be the biggest mistake of his life. Joe has been unfairly and arbitrarily detained in Doha for a number of years after his local business sponsor, a member of the royal family, secretly embezzled funds from Joe's company, causing cheques that Joe had written to bounce. Now, Joe was sent to a hellhole prison under the country's strict laws that criminalise bounced cheques. Joe is still stuck in the country, with vexatious actions being taken against him. For example, his name was added without his knowledge to a company while he was in prison, just to keep him in the country and perhaps keep him from talking. There is a pattern of legal abuse against foreign nationals by members of the royal elite. Ranald Crook, a British national also in his 70s, similarly has a number of vexatious cases against him that are entirely without legal merit. In both cases, we can see the foreigners being victimised by local influential Qataris who clearly have no qualms about traumatising these poor men. Now, it's astounding that the Australian government has done absolutely nothing to bring home their citizen. They're more than happy to call out Qatar over the strip search of Australian female passengers, and so they should, but seemingly cannot be bothered to even contact their diplomatic counterparts in Qatar for this 70-year-old grandfather with failing health. It's a responsibility of the Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne and the Ambassador Jonathan Muir to protect Mr Joseph Sarlak from abuse in a foreign nation, a nation who is purportedly an ally of our country. The harassment, the persecution, and the imprisonment of Joe Sarlak is preposterous. And the only thing worse than Qatar's assault on an innocent grandfather is Australia's senseless unwillingness to object. Now, if Australia can stand up for Matt Joyce and Marcus Lee during their ordeal in the United Arab Emirates, Kylie Moore-Gilbert in Iran, and Hakeem Al-Arabi in Thailand, and again, so they should, but what excuse do they have for ignoring Joe? Now, in my interview with Joe on the Gulf Injustice podcast, he speaks for the first time with his friend Andrew. The two are perplexed by the Australian government's disgraceful abandonment of their citizen in a country considered a strong ally. Australia categorically needs to warn citizens that entrepreneurs, businessmen and investors who consider Qatar a safe commerce venue should consider they too could end up like Joe Sarlak, Jonathan Nash, a British national in the same situation, and Ranald Crook, another British national in a very similar situation to Joe Sarlak, whose exciting opportunities turned out to be one-way tickets to hell. And the Gulf Injustice podcast, for the first time, Joe Sarlak. We talk in depth about the risks of doing business in Qatar, the abuse of foreign nationals, and the reluctance of the Australian government to fight for victims of Middle Eastern injustice.
Gulf Injustice Podcast is the official podcast of Detained in Dubai with Radha Stirling. Gulf Injustice can also be heard on Spotify and Apple Music or at www.gulfinjustice.news.